Welcome back to Rocky Mountain Gardens. This morning we're going to go on a visit to the country of Greece, as I promised. And guys, I want to share with you some of the things I learned about the history and culture of this country. Now, I know most of us studied Greek mythology in high school, and I must admit it wasn't my favorite subject, I guess, in English class. But oh my goodness, this was fascinating. And the Greeks are very, very interested in their own ancient history. It's really a very fascinating country, as I said. And the Greeks are such friendly and very, very nice people. I have to say it was one of the best trips to a foreign country that I have done. So if you get a chance, you might try taking a trip to let's see, it is called the Republic of, or the Hellenic Republic, I believe, is the official name of Greece. So let's take a look at how our trip went. We arrived at the Athens airport in the morning and then took a nice nap before we decided to go out for the evening. I wanted to show you a picture of the Acropolis here. This is the view from our hotel, and that evening, as I started to say, we went down to the Plaka, which is the oldest part of Athens, and there are all these narrow streets with many plants growing everywhere. Well, we did some shopping, and then as the sun set, you can see the Greeks are really great at lighting up the ruins that you see scattered between more modern buildings. And I wanted to share with you this cute kitty picture. And there are cats running around everywhere in the streets, in the restaurants. And one of our guides told us that they just love their cats, and everyone puts out little bowls of food for them. I wouldn't call them wild cats because they're very gentle and like to be petted, but we saw them everywhere in Greece. I just thought that was an interesting cultural little bit of information for all of you cat lovers out there. I was traveling with my brother Jim and my sister-in-law Mary Ann. Here we are having dinner that evening, and I ordered moussaka, my absolutely favorite Greek dish. Now, the next morning, we got up for a tour of Athens, and the first stop was this stadium that was built originally, I think, around 600 BC. It has been rebuilt and refurbished several times over the centuries, but it was used in 1896 at the first modern Olympic Games and also in the 2004 games that were held in Greece. Our next stop was going to the Acropolis, which I learned means the highest point in the city. And of course, the Parthenon is on top, but here is a photo of the Erechtheion with these caryatids, these little statues that you see here. They are actually reproductions. The original ones are in a museum that we'll take a look at a little bit later, but the pollution was really damaging them. Marianne and I are standing in front of the Parthenon now. You can see it is under a lot of restoration work at the moment. The Parthenon was used over the years as a mosque, a Christian church, and guys, it was simply amazing how many times we learned through our guides, our Greek guides, that Greece and the Greek islands have been invaded by other different countries in that area of the world. The Persians, the Ottomans, the Venetians, it just goes on and on. They've had a very turbulent history. Next, we will take a look at the pediment on the other side of the Parthenon. You can see some of the statuary still up there at the top. And this next little drawing shows where the pediment was on the original Parthenon, as well as where the friezes could be found. And they are all in museums today. I almost forgot to mention the one souvenir that I picked up for myself in Greece was this pendant. I'm going to show you a close-up of it right here. This symbol, this sort of spiral, represents eternity to the Greeks. And, you know, being a believer in our Lord, I love this because it reminds me that we can spend eternity with Him. And I think it's a great symbol to wear as a Christian or any believer. And so let's continue. This Ionic capital on this column was one of the three types of columns that were used in Greek architecture. And you can see the spiral was used on it, the same spiral as with my necklace. Looking down from the Acropolis, we could see this theater of Dionysus, which was used to perform the original Greek plays in ancient times, and it is still used today as an outdoor theater. Our last stop of the day was the new Acropolis Museum. Here you can see one of the friezes that was taken and brought inside for preservation, as well as the caryatids that were removed from the Erechtheion that I mentioned earlier, and they were cleaned up and preserved and look beautiful now. The next morning we got up, did our COVID tests before boarding our ship, which was called the Norwegian Jade. Here's a picture of it. And guys, if you're thinking about traveling right now, especially on a cruise, don't be afraid. It was a very, very safe place. We actually had to have a vaccine. We had to wear masks in public areas, and the ship was only half full of people. So we felt extremely safe. And I wanted to give you a quick look at the map that shows all the places our ship stopped. We did 6 stops on the cruise, and let's get started with the first one. We arrived in Crete and went to see the ruins of the ancient city of Knossos. This was the seat of the Minoan civilization, which was a very peaceful civilization. And here you can see the throne and the throne room of King Minos, whom the Minoans are named from. You might remember from Greek mythology the story of Theseus and the Minotaur and how he defeated the Minotaur in the labyrinth here at Knossos. The next day we landed at the island of Rhodes. And here on this photo, you can see where it is believed that one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world stood. It was called the Colossus of Rhodes. Here's one artist's sort of impression of what it looked like. And you can see he's holding fire up above. That is because he was actually used as a lighthouse for the port. Now, many people believe that the Colossus only was on one side of the entry to the port, not straddling, as you saw in the first photo. Here I am standing in a restaurant where we had lunch after stopping to see Knossos. And guys, the weather in Greece was so beautiful and lovely in October. We ate outdoors almost all the time. And oh, there's another one of those little kitties for you. After lunch, we drove to the Acropolis of Lindos, it's called, on the island of Rhodes. And here we climbed 300 steps to get to the top of the Acropolis with a fantastic view. And guys, these stairs are the original ones from ancient times. A few of the columns are still there and some have been reconstructed. And the next thing I want you to see is this beautiful view from the top. And that little bay there is called the Bay of St. Paul because where the arrow is pointing, first of all, there's a small inlet for ships to come through, but additionally, This is where it is believed St. Paul landed when he was traveling in Acts of the Apostles. On day 3, we sailed to Mykonos, which is so famous for these beautiful windmills and all of the whitewashed buildings. It is just beautiful with the blue sky, blue water, and white buildings. And here's another view of the really pretty windmills, which there were originally 10. Today there are only 6 of them left. While we were there, we decided to stop for a snack here right next to the sea, and I was able to get my favorite dessert, baklava with coffee. Yummy. It was so delicious to have a real Greek baklava. If you don't like it or haven't tried it, I really suggest that you do. And here's another one of those little kitties on the street. Everywhere we saw them. I hope you enjoy them. And the streets of Mykonos and of all the Greek islands really are very, very narrow, just like you see here. We continued walking to this little botanical garden, and it is also a cafe. You can see the little tables and chairs are sitting around. And the Greeks used this whitewash on their trees that you see here, as it's actually a lime wash that protects against disease and insects. And within the garden was this beautiful little pond. You know, I'm not very good at identifying plants from the Mediterranean region, since of course I cannot grow them here in Colorado, but I thought I would show you around. If any of you know the names of these trees or plants, look at these. They look like trees, but I think there's some type of cactus. If you know the name, I would love it if you would comment down below and let me know. I always love learning things about plants, of course, and this was a brand new one. You can see it had bloomed. I missed its prime, sadly. And guys, everywhere you walk in Greece, there are olive trees. The Greeks plant them in their backyards, along the sidewalks, and everyone eats tons of olives and olive oil. The next day, we stopped at Olympia on the Peloponnese Peninsula. You can see here the sign. It's the Archaeological Museum of Olympia. And this place is so famous because the Greek games really began in this location. Here you can see the ruins of the baths and the dressing rooms and so on used by the athletes when they were going to be competing in the games. This is one remaining column from the temple to Zeus, which was located on this space as well. Then I just had to stop and show you a photo of this beautiful oleander in bloom. Of course, another plant I can't grow in Colorado, but I sure do think it's pretty. We then walked over to see the actual stadium where the ancient athletes performed and competed. And you can see how it's flat in the middle and then it slopes up on the sides. The slopes are where the Athenians sat to watch the games. And then here is a picture of my feet, actually, standing on the starting line for the Olympic athletes in all of their races. And lastly, this spot is used for lighting the Olympic flame for every one of the Olympic Games. That's the first place it begins. Our next island to visit was Corfu. And oh my goodness, look at how beautiful the sea is and how lush and green it is compared to some of the other islands we've been to. Because Corfu is on the east side of the Greek peninsula, it gets much, much more rain. It's almost like a rainforest type of climate. And it is just gorgeous. Look at that. And you can see the small islands out there in the distance. It's simply beautiful. And also I wanted to mention this next picture shows cypress trees. Cypress trees were planted, they said they think by the Italians when the Venetians were in control of Corfu, and they just grow all over the island, large forests of them. Now, this beautiful Byzantine monastery that was built in the 1200s was up on a very, very high point of the island. The Byzantine Empire flag is the yellow one that you see flying there. And then, of course, the blue and white flag is the Greek national flag. And we walked through the monastery to this garden. Of course, there are so many lovely plants here, but I simply couldn't identify many of them. I think over here you can see some orange marigolds. Those looked familiar to me. But again, the beauty and the way the Greeks plant flowers and bushes and trees wherever there's a space just makes Greece a very pretty, very natural looking country, I guess. And look at this beautiful, unusual flower. If you know what it is, I would love to hear, because that one really caught my eye, as well as these pretty little pink blooms. And who could pass by this beautiful pink bougainvillea that I saw in the garden? And this plant does so well in Greece. It's a perfect climate for it. So it is planted all over. I just had to film this Medusa's head succulent that was growing in this large plot of land. Look at it. It just spreads all over the place. I think that's a perfect name with Medusa's, her crazy hair that was made of snakes. Yikes. Our last port of call on this journey was the very interesting island of Santorini. And as you will see in this next picture, Santorini has no port. So the big ships have nowhere to, dock. You have to use a tender, a small boat, to take you from the ship into a little small dock area. Can you see the tall cliffs on this photo with the town up on top? That is why there is no port. Our guide took us over to the other side of the island where you had a great view of the volcanic caldera that you just saw. And here is another view. In the center there, I'm doing a close-up of that island. That actually is still an active volcano. Now, this eruption took place during ancient times, and then the sea filled in the center of the island. But when divers have gone down, they actually have found many ruins of Greek civilization. Consequently, we have this legend that Santorini was the location of the famous Atlantis. We also had a wine tasting at a Santorini winery and a traditional Greek snack for the afternoon. Next, we stopped at the town of Fira, which is built on the side of a cliff, like most Santorini towns are. It is very famous for these blue roofs with white painted homes and churches. It was stunning at this time of day to see. And of course, there was lots of bougainvillea and other plants. So friends, I really hope you enjoyed this travelogue of my trip to Greece. And as we say goodbye, I encourage you to subscribe to my channel, give me a like, or share my channel with one of your friends who might enjoy it as well. This is Mary saying goodbye for now.